this is the here's the whole picture of what we're dealing with up here. It starts up here in Edmonton, up here in Alberta, with the Alberta tar sands moving across Canada. And when it enters the United States, it goes into northern Minnesota where it becomes line 3, where a couple years ago we had the treaty people gathering and a lot of camps up there to try to protect the water from um, that. And then it moves into Superior, where it goes into the Husky refinery, and then it comes out the other side, and we go into line 5, which stretches from Superior through northern Wisconsin, through Michigan, down under the Straits of Mackinac, and then down through Michigan, over back into Canada to Sarnia, and up through Toronto, Ontario, and it cuts over here to Vermont. And just a little where's my there. Here's the tar sands, the Athabasca forest regions of northern Ontario, how they used to look before they became this terrible tragedy. So in Minnesota, it crosses over line 3, and line 3 goes through, of course, this wild rice, water rich northern Minnesota 1855 treaty territory. And later on, we're going to hear from Everlasting Wind and Ron Turney about what's been going on up there, and this wonderful monitoring group that has arisen from that. Then it moves on. Oops, there's the Husky refinery on fire a few years ago in Superior. Always a dangerous situation waiting to happen. And then we go into line 5. So line 5 comes out of Superior, and here it's moving along northern Wisconsin and into the across the Bad River Reservation. And line 5 is 600 miles long, and it transports every day. It transports 23 million gallons of natural gas liquids, light crude oil, and light synthetic crude that's refined from the tar sands. And it's going through, as you can see, the heart of the Great Lakes. And in northern Wisconsin, here is the existing line 5 here that's running through the Bad River Reservation. And Bad River sued them in 2019 to get their pipeline out of the reservation because its easement had expired in 2013, and they didn't, and so they were sued. And we'll have Skabewis talk a little more about the details of what that entails right now. But what Enbridge did was they decided, well, we'll just run this expansion. So they created this incredible plan to run the pipeline not just past the White River and the Bad River, under those rivers, but to route it under the White River, the Marengo River. We've got the brook trouts and the Brunsweiler River, Silver Creek. We've got the Bad River here. We've got Tyler Forks here. We've got the Potato River here. So it's really a nightmare. It's just a nightmare that's waiting to happen. And what you don't see on this, I want to show you. If you look right down here, here's the Bad River. It's coming out of Mellon, and it comes down and it meets up with the Tyler Forks that's flowing here. So this next video that I'm going to show you, the videographer is standing right here where they intersect, or where they come together, and then they flow on down into the lake. But this is what we're dealing with.
Okay, this is where Bad River and Tyler Forks meet. That's Tyler Forks, and this is the Bad River right here. And then they flow into that common area down below.
So this is a terrain that they're talking about doing horizontal directional drilling from. And just one more look at this. This is coming out of the north, looking to the south. You can see this map is upside down. So here's Odana is over here. going up to there's Saxon and 122 off to Hurley. And but if you look up here, this is 169. This is where he was standing looking this way to shoot that video. So you see how everything is emptying into this into the Kakagan sloughs and into then the Lake Superior. And this is million-year-old bedrock. So while they thought it was a good idea to horizontal drill under all of the waterways in northern Minnesota, which was something like 220, you had that wetlands and the sand. Now we have this bedrock. So it's really crazy what they're trying to do up there. So from there we go over to hold on, we're going over to Michigan. Now you can see it's hugging the coast of the UP here, this little, and it gets to the Straits of Mackinac, and it goes under, line 5 goes under the straits. It splits out into 2 pipelines and goes under the straits. And Sean will be here to talk a little bit about what's going on with that. And then it stretches down through Michigan and over to Sarnia. Well, there's the straits. There's I don't know which side it goes under, one of the 2 sides, but the 2 pipelines, also an emergency,
To the
almost
right.
pipelines. So from there, it runs down back through Michigan and over to Sarnia, where it becomes line 9, 9A, 9, and 9B. Runs up here through Ottawa and then over to Portland, Maine. And tonight, Alain will be talking about what's going on up there. And just as a kind of a aside, that since 1967, the pipeline has experienced so many spills. As of 2017, the line 5 totaling 1 million gallons. But according to Violation Tracker, Enbridge itself has a total of 98 infractions, costing $282 million since 2000. And I don't have a a number of how much they've spilled, but you can imagine. So anyway, so now this is one more line, 6B, that's coming down. And tonight I've asked Ronnie Monroe to come, and she has been down in Fort Atkinson with a leak down there that she's going to share with us about that. And that has gone over to come around here. And this is, of course, one of the biggest disasters of Enbridge's history is the Kalamazoo oil spill in 2010, tributary of the Kalamazoo River. There was a corroded segment of line 6B that split open, and it was 17 hours before the technicians in Edmonton, Alberta, learned about the rupture. And by the time they shut off the oil, almost 1 million gallons of crude had spilled. And it's been millions and millions of dollars and just years to begin to clean up that oil spill. And I'll spare us all the horrible pictures of that and how they've had to deal with that. So that's kind of just this basic overview of what we're dealing with here. And I'd like to start with line 3. And we've asked Everlasting Wind, who is, her English name is Dawn Goodwin. And she's with the Wolf Clan from the White Earth Band. And she is one of the founders of RISE, the RISE Coalition, the Resilient Indigenous Sisters Engaging. And during Enbridge Line 3 stand in northern Minnesota, she became a citizen monitor as well. And she helped create Waadookawaad Amikwag, those who help beavers, who are this amazing monitoring group, have been monitoring Line 3 and the damage that continues to happen. And we also want to then hear a little on a video from Ron Turney, who is also part of that group. So, Dawn, do you want to share with us?
Sure. Buju gagayashi Indigenous Kawaba Biganikag and Dunjaba. Maingan Nindude. So my name is Everlasting Wind. I'm from White Earth and part of the Wolf Clan. So it's my responsibility as Wolf Clan to protect the environment and the people. So here I am, continuing to do my inherent job. So I began my fight against tar sands in 2009. I started learning about it, and tar sands that was one of the things I was going to stand up against, and stand for water. So as I began to learn and just continue to study, um, we were trying to stop an illegal pipeline through Red Lake lands, 8 acres, back in 2013. So it was kind of like the beginning of before Standing Rock, just after Occupy, and I just began to learn more and more, and then it became the Sandpiper. So we went to different hearings and meetings, and then that dissolved for the meantime and became Line 3. So they were running a scoping and for Sandpiper and Line 3 at the same time. So through Line 3, 68,000 people were against it. And it happened anyway, even though we said it's not a good idea, especially through LaSalle Valley and testimony. Paul Stolen had testimony. He was retired from the DNR. Said that was the worst place that you would ever put a pipeline, but they did. They did it anyway. So the aftermath of Line 3 construction, about 1,000 people ticketed and arrested, like 100 more, me included in charges in Akiing County, coming up May 23rd, contested omnibus. So there was 26 frac outs. Those of you who don't know, a lot of people on here I recognize and know. 26 reported frac outs. 2 frac outs that we know for sure that were unreported and seen by the Army Corps, Jamie Pinkham. So there's a lot of things going on. And then 3 documented aquifer breaches, and then several different overwater areas, some by Moose Lake and Walker Brook in LaSalle. So this has come about from this work that I've been helping with and helped create this group. Waadookawaad, Amikwag. I'm part of a team. I started off doing a little bit more monitoring, but we have a whole crew of people. So we have drone pilots and videographers and people that are on the ground doing water testing. We have geologists, Jeff Broberg and Laura Triplett. So just an array of people to help with the work. We have administrative people that have stepped up and done a really good job. And so for me, I'm just kind of doing what I can do to help with the group. I'll be out more a little bit as it warms up and out in the fields and whatnot. So, so what happened this winter with Walker Brook, that is in Clearwater County, and it's in a wetland area on a slope on a hill. In the water water and table was it's all saturated in that whole area, and they ended up scraping away the top layer and putting, it's called an aggregate blanket in Walker Brook to help stabilize the ground in that area where the pipeline was put in. And so Waadookawaad Amikwag has done a lot of different work, and there is a YouTube channel. So if you're interested, and I encourage everybody to check that out, share what you can. We feel that carrying our work forward now has been really important in telling everybody in Wisconsin what's going on. We've been to Bad River. We showed up for an Army Corps meeting in Bad River, and we got kicked out, but it's all good. We had a lot to say during that time. Um, so since then now, we also ended up creating another group called the Indigenous Women's Treaty Alliance. And so through that work, we are carrying Waadookawaad Amikwag's work and forward. So we're able to share that and let everybody know what has happened over here. And it's happening over in Michigan and Wisconsin. Same thing, especially with our treaties and the way we're being treated as and not honored as our voices and wanting to protect our lands and our waters. So it's the same thing that's going on there. And so if y'all can get ahead of the game in there in Michigan and Wisconsin, keep ahead of it. I guess I would say that I was trusting that they would do the right thing. Let's stand up. Let's make our voices be heard. Let's show them the science. Let's follow this process. It wasn't meant to work. It was just meant to appease us. I mean, even our governor started to have like a government relationship with our tribes, and but then we're ignored through that whole last leg of Line 3. They didn't even meet. They didn't even meet with their tribal people that year. So a lot of that, appeasing us. So do not think that they're going to do the right thing. They're planning to do what they want to do. And that's my message today. And I just hope we can have a win here. So here it's Line 3, and then we looked, and it's now 93 in its new corridor. So we've been saying line 3/93. Then it turns into 5 over there. So like they're saying, I'm part of Rise Coalition and also Indigenous Environmental Network. And so we've been starting to build relationships and get to know people in that area. So we'll be around. Let us know how you want us to help, and we'll be with you. And Miigwech, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dawn, for
Mhm.
coming and sharing. I remember being out on that bridge with you after all the damage had been done and just the deep sorrow that was going on. So thank you so much.
Mhm.
Um so I would like to now share this with your associate and our brother Ron Turney. And this is a little video snippet from a Zoom conference you all did, and he has some good words here for us too.
We're going to get started.
Oops.
We're going to get started with the question that we didn't quite finish in the program from noon today. So I'll turn it to Ron to ask about what the implications of these findings should be for Line 5 and other Enbridge projects, other pipeline projects around Turtle Island. So I'll turn it over to Ron to speak to the connections to Line 5 and other projects here.
Good evening, everyone. This is Ron Turney. Wanted to share some information about Line 3, what we've learned, and how it's going to impact Line 5, Wisconsin and Michigan. So over the past couple of years, we've learned a lot by being on the ground, keeping our eye on frac outs, aquifer breaches, being connected to the land out here. We live here, we're from here. This damage isn't short-term. We're seeing permanent long-term damage here to our aquifers and wetlands. We've raised the alarm to state and federal agencies, but our message has fallen on deaf ears most of the time. Many of the presentations I've had to do it's the first time these people are seeing this kind of footage, this kind of destruction in our environment out here. This isn't something you see the DNR or pollution control sharing publicly, and you'll never see Enbridge posting something like this. And what we witnessed on Line 3 was 28 frac outs that went reported, but we also witnessed many others that went unreported. And these are felonies in Minnesota. So Enbridge just recently pled guilty to conducting themselves in a criminal manner by misappropriating water at Clearbrook during the aquifer breach. And we have evidence of additional crimes, so they're not off the hook. During our meetings with the commissioners, DNR and MPCA, we found out that there was a serious conflict of interest. And with our meetings with Wisconsin DNR, we found out there's a similar pattern with permitting, meaning that Enbridge gets to decide who's their environmental monitor. They get to pay for them and supply them. And what we found out here in Line 3 was that 17 of the 41 monitors were former Enbridge employees or contractors, which doesn't give you a good independent oversight. And we see that same kind of problem at Line 5 in Wisconsin. According to the permit, when I asked the question, who's going to be responsible for providing monitors, they responded that Enbridge would be providing the monitors again. So this is a serious issue that led to many of the environmental impacts here at Line 3 in Minnesota. And this is what we're trying to do, trying to stop there in Line 5. Enbridge has a history of environmental damage, including one of the largest spills in Grand Rapids, another one in Kalamazoo, and many other pipelines have degrading infrastructure. So at Line 5, you're going to have the same company, you're going to have the same contractors, do the same kind of work 24/7, trying to get that pipeline in as fast as possible. Over here in Minnesota, Enbridge and Michaels failed at 2/3 of the river crossings and released drilling mud in much of the wetlands. With a massive number of tributaries leading into the Bad River aquifer, and it is a direct threat by Enbridge and Michaels. The EPA has already stated that Line 5 would negatively impact Bad River water quality and their wild rice. That entire area is like the lungs of the Great Lakes, the sloughs, the wild rice, and the Pinocchio mountain ranges. That's an abundance of fresh water, clean water coming off those mountains through those aquifers and into the Great Lakes. We can't let another tragedy like this happen in Wisconsin and Michigan. So that's why we're out here on the ground and sharing this information with you. Miigwech.
Oh, thank you, Ron. So we're going to take a little deviation from the linear pathway we've been taking. We're going to jump over to Line 5 Michigan because Sean has a time schedule going on. So Rebecca, if you want to get him, or Sean, you want to share your screen with what you have?
Trying to get my video to start here. And I'll share my screen and we'll get started. So thanks everybody for being here tonight. I am Sean McBrearty, and for the last 10 years, I'm working on the campaign to shut down Line 5 here in Michigan. Back, take you kind of to the beginning of our campaign against Line 5. Back in 2013, when we founded the Oil and Water Don't Mix campaign, we had discovered in the 3 years since the Kalamazoo oil spill all of the issues going on with Line 5, and so moving forward from that. So I'm going to go into a couple of those issues and then talk about kind of what we did about it over the last decade. So as you can see from this map, so all the spills that we've been able to track so far on Line 5, again, 33 spills since 1968, spilling a total of over 1 million gallons. As was mentioned during the Kalamazoo spill, one of the most dangerous parts of it was that Enbridge, actually, when their monitors read a drop in pressure in the pipeline, they decided to increase the pressure in the pipeline because they thought the pipeline was blocked. They didn't think there was an actual leak. So it took them 17 hours to shut down. And the only reason the spill was as big as it was, which is 1.1 million gallons, was because they increased the pressure on the line and ran it recklessly for 17 hours. So that problem really can't be overstated. So looking at the Straits of Mackinac, there is not really another body of water in the world that does the same thing the Straits of Mackinac do. Lake Michigan and Lake Huron are one body of water. And so the water sloshes back and forth over time. Now, the Straits is the focal point of that. That's where the water runs back and forth from Lake Michigan into Lake Huron and back. And so the currents in the Straits change direction 180 degrees every 1 to 3 days. At the peak flow of water through the Straits of Mackinac, the peak is over 10 times the flow of water over Niagara Falls. So it's a lot of water moving very quickly. This map that I'm starting with shows a study that University of Michigan Water Center did back in 2013 of what they then considered to be a worst case Line 5 spill in the Straits of Mackinac. Now, this volume spilled covering Lake Huron and Lake Michigan, as you can see here, was actually
Your slideshow is not moving through, by the way, Sean.
Excuse me, Sean. Yeah, you have is the slide 1 of a presentation of a 2021 presentation that is not a map. It looks like it's a video.
This one?
So you're not really sharing any movement, just so you know. Your slides haven't moved. So none of, yeah, so you might want to restart it.
Let's restart the share there. Thank you. Great, is that better? Can you see the beginning of the video here?
Yep.
All right, cool. So this is a video enactment that University of Michigan put together that shows what a 12-hour release would look like. And this is based off of a 1.1 million gallon spill, which we now know would actually be pretty small for a Line 5 spill. It would spill about 1.1 million gallons if the pipeline were shut down within an hour and 10 minutes. The fastest Enbridge could shut down this pipeline, according to Enbridge, the fastest they can shut this down is in 23 minutes. Which would still equal about a 250,000 gallon spill. So the reason you're seeing red, yellow, and blue is because since this is light crude and not heavy crude, it would fill throughout the water column. So the blue dots represent oil near the bottom, yellow mid-depth, red near the surface. As far as impacts to the communities, on the north side of the Straits here, St. Ignace, and this island you can see is Mackinac Island. Those two draw their drinking water straight from Lake Michigan, and Lake Huron in the case of the island. So the first thing that would happen was they would both have to shut down their water pumps, and Mackinac Island would pretty quickly run out of water. If it's a summer's day where there's a lot of tourists on Mackinac Island.
Thing at 7, but I just now see they're showing
if there's
this is line.
If somebody's talking, if you could please mute. So you can take a look at this is Mackinac Island. If it's one of the days in the summer where there's a lot of tourists, you'd have about they can take upwards of 5,000 tourists on the island in a single day, and you would see some major problems from that because they would also have to. When they shut down the pipeline or when they shut down the water intakes and there's an oil spill, the ferries that run people to the mainland also would not be able to run. So you'd potentially have a lot of people stuck on the island if Line 5 were to spill there. So that was kind of what we discovered back in 2013. And on top of that, that Enbridge doesn't have enough oil boom to even contain a spill in the Straits of Mackinac. The oil boom and the skimmers that they do have are made to work in 3 feet of water or 3 feet waves or less, which is hardly ever the case at the Straits of Mackinac. And when in 2018, a boat anchor struck Line 5 in the Straits and left 3 big gouges in the pipeline, it actually took Enbridge 2 weeks to be able to look down and see to be able to get a remotely operated vehicle down to the bottom of the straits to see what condition the pipeline was in. In those 2 weeks, they didn't shut down out of caution or anything else. And it took Senator Gary Peters from Michigan holding a special US Senate hearing and swearing in Enbridge under oath for them to tell us that. So huge problems with those pieces. And then, so in 2014, Governor Snyder and Attorney General Schuette in Michigan had just been reelected. And in the year that had gone on of our campaign, it was clear that neither of them were going to work with us or were going to do anything to make a move towards shutting down this pipeline. Now, the situation with the Straits in Michigan is very unique because since the pipeline crosses on the bottomlands of the Great Lakes, which are a public trust resource, the state had to issue Enbridge an easement to be able to operate there. They issued the easement back in 1953. So the governor and the attorney general could shut down Line 5 by revoking the easement. At least that's the legal theory that we were going with and that we still, frankly, believe in. So we decided when Governor Snyder was reelected in 2014 that our campaign was going to spend 4 years building a big enough grassroots operation that everyone running for governor and attorney general in Michigan in 2018 would have to have a position on Line 5. And we were very successful with that. At one of our community presentations in 2016, Dana Nessel, who was now our attorney general, was in the audience. And I remember after the presentation, she raised her hand and asked, can the attorney general file a lawsuit to shut down this pipeline? I said, yeah. And she looked at her wife and said, I think I'm running for attorney general. And 2 years later, she ran for attorney general and won. And she was on the ball on Line 5 from the very beginning. On the day she was elected, she started working to undo some of the Line 5 things that the previous legislature had done. Governor Whitmer had also taken a position to shut down Line 5. And so she had the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, which technically holds the easement. She had the DNR take about an 18-month study, and they asked Enbridge for all communications with the state dating back to 1953. And they went through tons of information about Line 5. And what they determined was not only that Enbridge is violating like 5 different sections of the easement, but that the last time they were actually in compliance with the easement was in 1968. And they'd been out of compliance with the easement for over 50 years. So November 13th, 2020, we actually won. We got the policy move that we'd been asking for 7 years at that point, when Governor Whitmer became the first governor in the history of the United States to revoke the easement for an operating pipeline that has not yet had a major rupture. And a few days later, Enbridge tried a move to put those. They sued the state and federal court, and they said that they wouldn't be complying with the shutdown order. So where we are with that now, so I'm going to start with the state and then talk a little at the national level. So right now, Attorney General Nessel is still fighting this out in court. The governor is still strongly supporting her. We are, right now we're hopeful that the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals is going to send this case back to Michigan State Court where it belongs, and where we have a very good shot at winning because state law protects the waters of the Great Lakes under the public trust doctrine. So that's where we are kind of legally right now. The one thing that could stop this, before I say anything about the tunnel, so I'll say the one thing that could stop this process in its tracks is President Biden has broad authority here. When pipelines cross international borders, they have to have a presidential permit. And President Biden could revoke the presidential permit at any time. Presidents have broad authority to do that. They actually don't need a reason to revoke a presidential permit, but right now he has two. Enbridge is operating illegally in Michigan without an easement. They're also violating the sovereignty of the Bad River Band, and a federal judge declared they're actively trespassing in Bad River. That's plenty of reason for President Biden to order this pipeline shut down. We also know that unlike the lies that Enbridge tells in the media, when their experts are in court under oath, they've had to admit that shutting down Line 5 will not create fuel shortages and will not even really create price increases in the Midwest or in Canada. The reason they don't want this shut down is because it is, once we shut down a pipeline like Line 5, other pipelines will fall. And they know that. They don't want that precedent on the books. So the other thing I just wanted to address quickly, here in Michigan, they're talking about building a tunnel underneath the Straits of Mackinac and putting a new pipeline in the tunnel. That is more, it's more mythology than anything else. When I look at the Straits today, I don't see a tunnel. I see a 70-year-old failing pipeline pumping 1 million gallons an hour through the worst spot in the Great Lakes for an oil spill. The tunnel will likely never get built. Enbridge's board has not approved it. They've not updated their, they still say it's going to cost $500 million when they full well know the actual cost of something like this would run 2 to 3 billion minimum. Their board hasn't approved it. Their board hasn't approved any capital spending towards building the tunnel. There are experts who have raised all sorts of issues with the tunnel design and construction ideas in both the Army Corps of Engineers and with the Michigan Public Service Commission. I think the first ruling we're likely to get on that is the Michigan Public Service Commission. And I would not be surprised if later this year, the Public Service Commission says that Enbridge is not allowed to build the tunnel. However, the other problem we run into is that can actually be a good scenario for Enbridge, right? Because they don't really want to build this tunnel. They want to keep their decrepit pipeline running through the Great Lakes until it ruptures. So we have to fight. So we're fighting the tunnel through the regulatory space right now, through the Public Service Commission and the Army Corps of Engineers. And then we're fighting the existing pipeline running through the Straits of Mackinac in the press and at the national level with our members of Congress and with the White House. So there's a couple of actions in the chat here. One, to sign up to volunteer. Even if you don't live in the Great Lakes region, we have phone bank teams. We have all sorts of things that folks can do to help. So please sign up there. And then we also have the link to our petition. Well, it says it's no longer a petition, actually. We were able to get messages sent straight into the president's inbox so that whenever people take that action, it sends separate emails to the White House email on Line 5. So please sign up for both of those. I should say in the 6 months that it took, or in the year, no, it's almost 2 years that it took of Whitmer being in office from the time she took office until she revoked the easement, the DNR was going through their study. But another thing that really turned the tables was we had over 80,000 Michigan residents calling the governor's office and telling her to shut down the pipeline like she promised to do in the campaign. And then she followed through. So, those grassroots actions, getting in touch with the White House as often as possible, contacting your members of Congress about this are absolutely influential in making sure that we get a win here. Thank you very much for having me tonight.
Barbara, you're muted.
Thank you very much, Sean. And thank you for everything that you're doing over there in Michigan. And so we're going to jump over back to line 5, Wisconsin. And just a little message from Mike Wiggins, the Bad River chairman. And we get to see Joe Rose too. So.
We're going to start telling the technical details, the environmental details of our story of why our land and water are leading us in that effort to reject Line 5. I would say really quickly that the power of the Bad River, the actual Mushkazebe, the river itself, is just, if left alone, the Bad River would have that line destroyed in a matter of probably under 10 years. There's another spot where I like to look at the world this way, where the Thunderbirds came and pounded our land and blew out a huge beaver dam that released and slammed right into the Line 5 area and created another area where Line 5 is compromised and is on its way to disaster. The work of those Thunderbirds, the work of the power of our river are clear, tangible, animate leadership signals to us that the Monidoog in our home says, no, get out, right? And so we're gonna follow that up with the work that we have to do as a tribe, as a people, to get Enbridge off of our reservation and remove that imminent threat to our waters into Lake Superior. So.
Oops. Okay. Thank you, Mike. All right. Next up, David Joe Bates. I'm so glad you're here. David is from the Bad River Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, and he is our drone operator and longtime water protector brother. And he's got some stuff to show us of what's going on really imminently. Are you there, David?
Well, yes, good evening. Thanks for having me this evening. And the last, I got to turn some volume down here. Getting terrible back feed, I'm sorry.
It's better now.
Okay. Yes, I did lose a drone previously back in September. Unfortunately, it was shot down. Through the generosity of a lot of friends, I was able to purchase another drone and conduct surveillance out on Line 5 once again. And I've recently been flying. What we're looking at here now is the current condition from within the last few days of Line 5 as it crosses the meander. And we're actually, this picture here, we're looking north towards Lake Superior. And there's a clump of trees and brush that's right down there along the riverbank at the bottom of the picture. Yes, and what you have there is there's some monitoring cameras there. They have set them up with solar. There's also some markers. The markers are there to give you an indication of how close the riverbank is to the pipeline. And in this picture here, we see the swirl. That's actually a swirl that's right there at the bank. And what's happened is that swirl is going backwards against the current and eroding more of that shoreline on that big old tree that's right there next to those yellow monuments. Now, I believe Enbridge is the one that set all these monuments out there, but it's worth keeping. Okay, so I'm getting, why was my drone shot down? I was actually observing a stretch of shoreline along Chequamegon Bay that the landowner was given a stop work order. And I was just out there to see if indeed he had stopped the work that this non-tribal member was ordered to do. And in the process of doing that, he shot my drone down. The county, he's considered one of the good old boys, so they refused to prosecute him, but it's not over yet. It's not over yet. So
No,
But anyways, back
no.
to line 5, and I know we got sidetracked, but back to line 5. This meander is one of our main concerns right here. I also have additional video where Bad River during high times is actually flowing across the banks right into the Akiing River. And of course, the Akiing River goes right out into the sloughs where our Mignault grows. And that's the reason why we're here. This is a current picture here. We're looking straight down over line 5 and those markers that are out there. But I haven't been able to fly on the last couple of days on account of the weather. But I know with this rain that we've had today, rain that's scheduled for all day tomorrow, more than likely the Bad River will be out of its banks again once I'm able to get back down there.
Joe, question.
Sure.
How many feet from the pipeline was the Bad River when it was put in, and approximately how many feet from that line? I see it running over now, but how many feet the line and how deep is that?
Well, in 1953, when this pipeline was built with a 50-year life expectancy, it was approximately 350 feet from the river. So in nearly 70 years, the river has now come to within 30 feet of the pipeline itself. And anytime that we have the high water like this, you can see the ripples going across the surface right there. That is actually scouring the surface of the meander right off there, and it's creating a new channel that's going to cut that pipeline off.
Yeah. I've got one more. This was the latest one that you posted on the 15th, before the storm.
Right. Now, this one here, the water's still high, but it's not as deep as it was, but there's still water scouring the surface as well as churning against the bank of the river. And this is going in an easterly direction. So there we go. And I see there's a comment about our brown water. That's actually, that's clay. At one time, our entire area was the bottom of Lake Superior. And even to build a new well right here in our basin where we live, kind of in our nest that we live in, we got to go down over 200 feet of clay to get to the sand. That's how far deep we have to go. And yes, Catherine, there is a lot of wildlife here. We have the plants that survive on this water. We have the animals that eat those plants. We have the animals that consume those animals that eat the plants. We have an entire multifaceted ecological area right here, teeming with plants and medicine and wildlife that sustained our ancestors for generations. And that does include birds, yes.
So are you gonna be able to get out again soon? I'm in Madison, so I know the weather's been bad up there, but
Well, it'll be a couple of days. tomorrow, it's supposed to be overcast, rainy, high winds. Of course, I'm limited by weather and weather conditions as far as flying that drone. It's not a waterproof tool, but I'll be out there as soon as I can get back out there again.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Let's see.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
If the solar's not working after days of overcast and rain condition, how is Enbridge monitoring this?
Well, Enbridge, they do have regularly scheduled helicopter safety flights. Now, at one time, I had the courtesy of getting a phone call from April Holdren. She's a communication specialist. She used to message me when Enbridge would fly their helicopter because she knew that I was I checked out Line 5 a lot across our reservation. I've been practically all the way across, and from one point to the other, I have to move. But she used to call me, but she no longer does since the court case was settled, and some of the documents that they had in the court case become public knowledge about their meetings with tribal members here on the reservation. So now it's just if I hear a helicopter coming, I got to get out of there and get out of there fast.
Thanks. But they can't necessarily monitor it right now either.
No,
they have to
no,
have
but
pretty decent conditions as well.
that is true. But and you know, they just fly over it, look for visual visual indications that there's a problem there.
Yeah,
That's all I can do.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons we've encouraged people to go out and look at the pipeline main line and other, just take a walk and look out there. The last time the washout on Denemy Creek was found, it was because some tribal member was walking through the woods hunting. And I think they paid a lot of attention to this recently with the helicopter rides, and including a helicopter crash or two on the reservation here in recent years. But they're doing an awful lot of more. They're very, very aware of this situation. And so I think they're going to be keeping a closer eye on it. But the question is whether or not the governor of the state of Wisconsin or anyone else has called upon Enbridge to consider shutting this down as a safety precaution before something happens, because you can see how much is scoured before, and the water is now on the rise again today. So
Absolutely. I believe it too. Shut it down. It's unsafe, not needed.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Joe. Thank you so much. And we'll be watching as you get back out there, of course.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the invite, and glad I could provide some videos for you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so we're going to jump back over to Skabewis, and he's just going to kind of give us a brief idea of what's going on with that lawsuit, and then some stuff we can do too. So have at it, Mr. Skabewis.
okay, thanks, Barb. And I just want to say that I really appreciate the diversity of the crowds we have here on this evening Zoom. We meet once a month as a regular coalition meeting at 11 o'clock. So I'm seeing a lot of diversity and a lot of people that can't make those meetings, and I really appreciate your attendance here. That coalition has been built with the help of Honor the Earth and Sierra Club 350.org, Coalitions United by Water, Not for Sale, all kinds of organizations in the Squamigan Bay area, and it continues to grow with organizations of interest about the water. Not all of them are there because they hate Enbridge or anything, but they're on board because we're talking about the economy of the area, the resources of the area that Joe just talked about, the fish, the deer, the wildlife, the wild rice, the cranberries, the blueberries, martins, elk, in abundance of area. And part of the reason the Bad River Reservation is where it is because of the online water resources and fisheries that had access to tribal members off of that reservation. So I'm just glad to be here, and I'm glad that everyone's joined in, and that the coalition, which now includes some 200 individuals representing 60 or 70 different organizations, continues to grow. And I kind of call my update tonight called the tipping point. And the tipping point is where nobody from the political arena, which Michigan has already achieved in some ways, and in fact in Minnesota as well, with having your politicians having to answer the tough questions of what side of the line they are, what is their policy on conversion to the green economy, on fossil fuels, on supporting these efforts to help clean up our environment and prevent future bad operations and oil spills. I wanted to thank Joe Bates for coming on and doing that presentation. I didn't know if he'd be in tonight, but again, the concern about that river, if people want to respond to that, they can just go to evers.wisconsin.gov. There's an email and communications way to just ask the governor to simply say, look at, you just called out a flooding emergency. Have you made a phone call to Enbridge to ask them what the status of the line, and if it could be shut down, if it would be shut down under certain conditions? And David J. Bates, he's in Facebook. You can find him, and he posts his videos there on a regular basis, and at the Pinocchio Hills Environmental Alliance Facebook site as well. And Bad River has done well in its lawsuit. They did win a major component of the lawsuit, where the judge ruled that Enbridge, a foreign corporation, was trespassing on their line, and that there was going to be damage awards. He just balked at the request for the injunction to stop the pipeline from operating, citing what he called widespread economic consequences. Of course, we know that most of those economic consequences is to the billfold of Enbridge and its employees and stockholders, mainly because the amount of oil and gas products that are left in the United States is a small amount compared to what goes on to Canada. And the judge also made a point of acknowledging that the foreign affairs minister invoked a 1977 treaty. And for tribal nations and indigenous communities and others who look at the issue of treaty rights and treaty claims and treaty protections, it's just laughable that a brand new treaty of recent vintage would overcome the resource gathering, pristine water rights, and so forth of the tribes. If you're interested in signing a petition, I think there's going to be a delay in that presentation. It was coming up in the next couple of days. I think they put it off for strategic reasons. You can go to communitiesunitedbywater.org and look for the letters to the ministers of Canada and get your organizations and yourself to sign on to that. Someone just put that in the chat. I see it just popped up. My main goal this summer in organizing, other than a lot of the other small local efforts that Communities United by Water, the coalition is putting on in the Squamigan area, watch for potlucks, watch for other events in the area that are taking place. A lot of the subgroups are producing a lot of smaller venues for educating people in the community. We're going to be taking literature to the powwows and everything. But we already know that we have a massive impact on this issue, especially looking in reflection of what's happened in Minnesota in regards to all the breaches of aquifers, the illegal activities and so forth, and in conjunction with what's happened in Michigan with their own lawsuit. The tipping point is obvious because I think we're getting to that point where not only politicians and the economy and other community people have to respond to this thing, but we're winning because we can see it in how Enbridge is reacting to us. They are putting more money, billions of dollars, into public relations lobbying in their effort, and everyone is so aware of it. It's easy to talk about all the ads, all the radio ads, all the newspaper ads, all the food shelves that are funded, fishing derbies at high schools and grade schools in the area. It's just unbelievable. And all I can say is I tell people, if you want some money, go get it. They're giving it away for the first time. They're sharing it with everyone. But it tells me that we're winning this battle. And the biggest indicator was when they ran Tim Michaels as their governor's candidate, the general contractor for the Line 5 reroute, because they had lots of money, flew to Trump and came back and ran in the state of Wisconsin, and he lost. That's a major victory. As in Michigan and other places, we're putting politicians on the line to make a statement. So do what you can, as Sean and other people have said. Talk to your clergy, talk to your high school principals, talk to your local politicians and your aldermen, and little by little try to get them on board to participate in some of it, because I think we're having a big impact. My main goal this summer is to get people to the September 4th annual Mackinac Bridge Walk. And anything that goes into that in terms of organizing organizations. We're asking people simply to be as independent as they can in how they get there and how they lodge their supporters. It's an international effort that's going to be bringing people from Sarnia, Ontario, Canada toward Mackinac, from Duluth, Minnesota, along Line 3, Line 5 over to Mackinac, and down from Canada, all people who are interested in this subject, and the subject is protection of our water. Come listen to the water is the theme. And what we want to do is join the 20,000 to 25,000 people that already go on that bridge walk on September 4th with a message of support for the Michigan governor and the state of Michigan in its lawsuit. We want to stand with people who are trying to support pristine water. And we will be relying greatly on the local Michigan community to help organize us when we go there. What we know is that, again, the event can be found at Communities United by Water as a separate event. That's the September 4th Bridge Walk, which has instructions about how it works. We're waiting to find out which end of the bridge the governor is going to walk on. There's several options. You can go all the way across and back. You can go all the way across and stay on one end. You can go halfway and come back. The bridge starts shutting down at 11 o'clock, so you can do short walks. We want to let Michigan people organize this so that our group, our presentation and press conference, or whatever takes place after that bridge walk, whether we walk with the governor, whether we walk behind the governor, or whether we walk later after everyone else has gone through and follow things up. We want to be organized to give a distinct positive message about water on that day in order to allow the, like I said, 20,000 people and all the media that comes with that event follow us. In between that, on the Labor Day weekend, we're looking at the local coalition there that's done Oil and Water Doesn't Mix in the Paddle Out, and the other various people who've had 10 years of activities over there at Mackinac already for the Labor Day weekend. The the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa is hosting a Friday, September 1st feast. And then there's a Saturday Waters Life Festival in Bay Park at Petoskey, Michigan. Both the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa and Petoskey Bay Park are about 45 to 50 minutes south on the main lands of Michigan there from Mackinac. And it seems like a lot of the activities have been centered around there. Typically, they have Friday night activities and feast. And then they go into Saturday with the festival with music and vendors. They've done paddle out actions with canoes, kayaks, lots of activities, and we're going to let the local people do that. On Sunday, they've typically had art build out and social networking. It's supposed to be a relaxing day. And then Monday, organizing for the walk. Again, both of those are separate posts. I encourage you to go to Communities United by water.org and look at that event schedule to check in. If you have information about another event in your community that's coming up, please send it to barbwith@gmail.com, and she can post her email or connection there. And make sure that there's petitions there as well, being sent to Governor Evers to reject Line 5. So there's a lot of activity there, and I really encourage you to utilize that in part as kind of a central station for information and activities in the Great Lakes. So, Miigwech.
All right. Thank you so much, Skabewis. I have asked Ronnie Monroe, our friend in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, to come and give us some information about Enbridge Line 13 that has been leaking. And Ronnie, if you want to step up and
You bet.
There you are. Hi, Ronnie.
Hi. I feel like a fish out of water here with all you northern folks, and you're all so dynamic and fighting this pipeline. I'm afraid my presentation is going to be very boring for all of you. But thanks for inviting me anyway. This is going to be a little disjointed because I had it going with slides, but I'm going to have to kind of wing it here. But most of my efforts lately have been working with the technical side of dealing with oil spill remediation. And I'm kind of swimming in my own little dark pond by myself with this. I've become a remediation nerd, more or less. And I sort of feel like I've earned my honorary master's degree from YouTube University by watching a lot of engineering, petrochemical and engineering videos put out by a lot of departments. Enbridge has made this as difficult as they possibly can for the layperson to understand. So needless to say, it's been a steep learning curve, and I'm probably not the best person to be doing this, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of help for environmental activists when this kind of thing happens, especially when it happens like this one was just an absolute disaster. And it's I'm sure, the people that live around this, the people that live on the Rock River and recreate on Lake Koshkonong are concerned about it. But it's
Ronnie.
Yes.
It's Paul.
Yeah.
I want to direct you just a little bit to answer some questions, because I know how you operate and everything. But let me ask this question: when that spill first started, what year was it, and how much did Enbridge report? And then
I was going to get into that. That's coming.
Right, yeah.
That is coming.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I don't know if everybody knows that there are 4 pipelines in this corridor, and actually line 13 is the smallest of the 4 at 20 inches and 180,000 barrels per day. That whole corridor accounts for 2.3 million barrels per day going past my town, or 98 million gallons of petrochemicals in a day. So it's absolutely massive. And yeah, so this line that leaked is a pure diluent line that flows northward. All the other 3 lines come southward, but this is going north to Superior. And there are not very many leaks. I think all these diluent lines are probably connected. There was one in 2016 up at Fort McMurray, and there was one in 2020, the Polaris line, which was also in Alberta. So, but those they're different leaks. They're surface leaks, and this is a subterranean leak. So, some of this information will apply a little bit to line 5 and to the lines that have dilbit in them, because those lines do contain natural gas liquids. That's a constituent of diluent, and diluent is a constituent of dilbit. So, but natural gas liquids are what are transported sometimes in line 5 too, but not quite in the same form as diluent. I'm going to direct everybody to the Environmental Cleanup and Brownfields Redevelopment. It's called BARTS, BRRTS on the web. It's a site operated by the DNR. And there you can track any spill. All of the paperwork that is generated by Enbridge or the DNR is on here. And as you can see, these, this was on my slide, but there are 4 pages of that for this spill alone. There are thousands of pages of documents for this particular spill. So if you've got a pencil or pen around, the case number for this particular spill, and it's a good idea to write it down. Actually, I can put it in the chat, but if you want to write it down, it's 02-28-586-199. I will put that in the messaging. And if you're interested, you can type that in there. Oh, thank you, Rebecca. You can type that in and it'll take you right to the spill. Otherwise, you got to search, and it's kind of hard searching that. But it has the entire history of this spill. So I'm going to try to go through 4 years of history in a nutshell, and it's kind of hard. I'm going to have to do a little bit of reading here just to keep this moving, or you'll want to throttle me. But this spill is located west of Fort Atkinson in the Koshkonong Township on the bank of the Rock River, just to the east of Highway 26 bypass and just south of Highway 106. It's about 1,000 feet from the Rock River. And it's about 1.5 miles north of Lake Koshkonong. The river flows into the lake there. So there are several wildlife areas surrounding this, probably several thousand acres of wildlife lands, including what was a heron rookery, but the birds have moved on. They moved out. So the leak was said to have occurred on or about April 26, 2019, almost 4 years to the date, minus 6 days, when an employee noticed a bad odor. So much for the SCADA system that did not go off, unlike Kalamazoo, where it did go off and they just pumped more dilbit. So maybe we're lucky that way. I don't know. So the employee noticed this and he reported this. And then the following transpired before Enbridge notified any authority of anything. First of all, they didn't call the fire department, and these were volatile gases that were very, very evident. On May 3rd, 2019, they did soil gas readings. From the 15th to the 17th, they did hydro excavation around the suspected release source. They removed impacted soil for laboratory analysis and for waste characterization. Then they dumped it in the Mallard Ridge landfill. Advanced disposal dumped it. So then, let's see, May 17th, they identified the spill as coming from line 13. Mind you, from the 26th to the 17th of 2019. So what are we looking at? 21 days there. And they did a temporary repair. So it leaked for an additional 3 weeks. So then they did some soil sampling, and it indicated benzene at 1.6 milligrams per kilogram, exceeding the regulatory limits. So at that point in time, they brought on AECOM, which is a large multinational environmental consulting firm, and they were hired to deal with this case because you hire a large environmental firm to deal with what you later report as a 1.3 gallon spill, right? So on June 2nd, 2019, they repaired the spill. July 31st, August 2nd, and October 2019, they removed tons of additional soils for analysis. And then they stated further removal was not practical. They called this an excavation. I call this hauling away evidence. Keep in mind, no authority had been notified yet. High amounts of gasoline-related organic chemicals were found in the soil. And that's kind of the last we hear about things. There's radio silence for an entire year after this. Yet they end up using the data from this excavation to determine spill volume, which they figured at 1.3 gallons at one point. They're still using this data for the current spill volume, which I'll fill you in on here shortly. On July 21st, 2020, AECON did soil borings. So this is a whole year later. And they advanced to a depth of 35 feet, and they found gasoline range organics at 11,000 micrograms per liter in groundwater. Okay, well, now they're concerned. It's in groundwater. They can't haul it away. So following the receipt of this data on July 31st, Enbridge finally reported the spill to the NRC, to the Wisconsin DNR, and a PHMSA report was filed. PHMSA is the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. This was the first notification of any regulatory agency, and it was 14 months after the spill. So nobody was aware that, other than Enbridge, that this had occurred. It was at that point that I got involved. So what happened in the 14 months prior, I mean, we can only take Enbridge's and AECOM's word for it since nobody was notified. No regulatory agency was involved. So in January of 2021, they filed the first site investigation report, and AECOM got roasted by our citizens pretty badly at the county board meeting where Enbridge came to speak. And I could tell you some of the comical things that, you know, Enbridge said that they couldn't get in there to do stuff because COVID was going on, and they just didn't want to have the guys that close to each other during COVID. And I was just like, well, I mean, aren't you guys wearing SCBA, like air to, you know, I mean, come on, nurses are going to the hospital in the little blue masks. You can certainly use your SCBAs. But I mean, there was just one thing after another wrong with that report. And it was after that that AECOM exited and a new consulting firm came on, and that's WSP. So, and then in April of 2021, the Wisconsin DNR alleging that Enbridge violated Wisconsin law by failure to report for 14 months. And there is a legal case pending on this at this point in time. In November of 2021, they raised the spill volume from 1.3 gallons to 29 to 33 barrels, or 1,225 to 300 or 1,386 gallons, where it sat until about a year ago. And then in April 2022, which is a year ago, the spill volume was again changed, and it was raised to 3,336 gallons, or 79 barrels, up to almost 8,000, 7,937 gallons, or 189 barrels. And since then, they've drilled an additional monitoring well, which was highly contaminated, which is another 50 some feet away from one of the initial really highly contaminated ones. So that basically adds all that area in there that could be highly contaminated soil. So that should also be figured in. And I'm on my soapbox right now with DNR that I feel that they need to recalculate this. The ISO contours, where they draw the lines of where spill goes, avoid that area. Those are not included. And the areas within that ISO contour have benzene levels of greater than 10,000 micrograms per liter. So that needs to be taken care of. I do think that the spill volumes are greater than we're being told. So in a nutshell, over the last 4 years, monitoring wells have been placed at 18 locations. That was kind of a slow development. I think they had initially 7 or 9, and now we're up to 18 locations, and some of the locations have more than one well drilled in there. Some have 3 at like 32 feet, which is where the water is, and then down to 60, and then even 100 feet below the surface. They placed 11 remediation wells. They've done dozens of soil borings. I can't even tell you how many. They had to do a hydrogeological survey to find out which way the water went, what kind of aquifers are down there. I mean, a great deal of money's been spent on mitigating this spill, but I'm not sure whose money it is. They've done UVOs, which is ultraviolet optical screening testing, where they came in and they sunk these ultraviolet type things to find out how much product, they call it, was in all of these wells. And from there, they placed those 11 remediation wells, of which 7 are extremely contaminated. There's over 2 feet of what they call product, 2 feet of petrochemical muck in there. They've recovered 500 gallons, but the product was so thick, they actually had to mechanically pump it before they could put in their submersible pumps to pump it out. It was just ruining their submersible pumps. So they put that stuff in barrels and they sent it to a toxic waste dump in Arkansas, where it was injected several thousand feet below the surface. God only knows. So that's what happened to that. We are hoping that those remediation wells get retested, because they've been saying that they've brought the levels of that down, but we're not sure that they're going to stay down. We're concerned that they're going to fill back up. So we are asking to have that retested as well. So every quarter they do these monitoring well reports, and they're available to the public on that BART's website. And several of the monitoring wells have perpetually high levels of BTEX chemicals. BTEX chemicals are benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene. While some of the levels have come down some, they seem to just kind of fluctuate, basically between 15,000 micrograms per liter up to 23,000. So they're just kind of bouncing around there. Given
Bonnie?
it's been, yep.
We're gonna have to wrap it up, and one of the things I'm wondering, is there something that we can do? Is there some action we can take? Is there anything?
I think right now, basically, where we're at with this is I'm working with a person in the local government here, and we do meet with the DNR. They're in a fact-finding stage right now, and it's going to take, I hate to tell you folks this, but years. It is going to take years before we find out how much is down there, how much of it we can actually remove, the patterns of where this groundwater is going. We have 20 some residents not too far from there. Their wells have to be tested quarterly too, because it could potentially get into their drinking water. Enbridge did buy the property that this occurred on. So yeah, they own that now. I don't know how that influences some of the stuff that we can do there. They are going to go, they're going to start doing something called soil vapor extraction and possibly air sparging, which they're trying to get oxygen down there so that this oil degrades. But, I'll be honest, 4 years, we're sitting pretty darn close to where we were when this was discovered 3 years ago. It's just, it's really hard to get out of there.
I'm just so very sorry to hear it.
Yeah.
And
so
if there's stuff that comes up, you can always reach out to us at Communities United by Water. We can get that word out, updates, any of that. It's just very sad to hear.
We haven't had a lot of luck even with the press picking it up, even with the increase in the spill volume. I'm hoping that if we get another increase in spill volume here, that hopefully the press will be a little bit more interested in covering this story. But it was a big story when it broke, and there was a 14 month delay, but now we are just sitting. It's every couple of months I go through all this data and see if I can find anything that just doesn't look right, and bring that to the attention of regulatory agencies. But it's just a lot of boring minutia work that has to be done just to make sure that something doesn't get snuck by us by Enbridge, which is like so very typical of them.
I was going to say, what are the odds?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you
You
so
bet.
much for coming and sharing with
You bet.
us. The bad news, but we're glad to have you here.
Yeah, it is what it is,
Yeah. So, well, thank you for that. And I'm going to actually I'd like to, Sean has spoken. I want to get into line 9, and for that we have Alain here from Quebec. And Alain, if you want to.
Yes.
Are we sharing you? Are you sharing your screen?
Yes, I will.
Okay, let me stop sharing.
Okay.
And then you are now a co-host. Here we go.
Is this working?
Yes. Great.
Good.
Well, introduce yourself, Alain, and
Yes, so my name is Alain Mignault, and I've been working against pipelines for the last 9 years, and more intensively since 2017. And so my presentation is shutting down the mouth of the snake. Because, well, I like this metaphor of the snake because it really represents the danger of it, and also the lies that the government often use to present tar sands. For example, they often talk about ethical oil. I don't think you think it's very ethical. I don't think there's anything ethical about it. And I talk about the mouth of the snake because I live in Montreal, so-called Montreal, where it's the end of the pipeline. So I'm showing you this map. So you're more familiar with this section that is in the U.S. And but line 9 is the route here, and it goes right to Montreal in province of Quebec. You have the province of Ontario here. And one thing that is not necessarily known very much is that this area from Sarnia to Montreal, it's about 1/3 of the population of Canada that lives there. So you have 10 million people right here. And population of Canada is about 35. We're not too sure exactly where it is now, but it's about that. So between 1/3 and 1/4 of the population of Canada. So all this population water is threatened by a spill. So if it happens next to Toronto, that would be really terrible. And Montreal, and millions of people would be affected. And actually, there has been a simulation by computer from an engineering firm in 2015 for a different pipeline, but that passes in the same location. And they found that within 12 hours of the spill, if the spill occurs in the Ottawa River, it would take only 12 hours so that all the water intake of the island of Montreal, which is here. So this big island here is the island of Montreal with 1 million people living here. The island of Laval also has hundreds of thousands of people, and this whole area has about 2 million people. And the problem is that it happened before in different locations. It happened in Saskatchewan, that a spill like this in the Saskatchewan River. It happened in Mignault after a train exploded a few years ago, and the water was shut down for between 55 and 63 days. The problem with an island is there are no alternative for the water intake. So if we don't have water for 55 or 63 days, it would be a sanitary crisis with lots of death. So it's really scary perspective. So it has awakened lots of the cities surrounding this area, the simulation, and they have made all kinds of committees to try to find a solution, but there's no solution besides shutting down the pipeline. So lots of people have done lots of things. For example, this is the territory of the Chippewa or Anishinaabe, and also the Kanyen'kehá:ka, and it's a territory that has been theirs for thousands of years, and there has been a lawsuit by the Chippewa to try to stop the reversal of the line in 2015. Unfortunately, they have been they lost their lawsuit, and so people have taken things in their own hands, and many action has been done. The latest one has been done in October, where the Antigone Collective has blocked the end of the Line 9 at the Valero Terminal in the Montreal Harbor. And as you can see on this image, there are towers, and activists were in the tower. So that's the end of Line 9. And the tanker comes to be filled, and by being in the tower, they prevent the tanker from being filled. So the boat had to leave empty. And of course, it's illegal. So there were 12 people accused of trespassing, mischief, resisting arrest. Their next court appearance is in May. And these days, that's one of the things that I'm doing, is trying to help them with their defense. And a little bit more precision on what they have done. So there are activists in those towers, but their big innovation this time is that they have bought a container, and they have put the container right where the fire truck would go to pick those activists from the towers. So it's really delayed the fire truck to get into the site. So 6 activists were locked to this container, and 5 women and one man. So that's also I have difficulty seeing my own titles, but there are some projects. This is not related to Line 9, but it's related to Enbridge. So how can we hurt Enbridge? Well, it plans expansion of its gas pipeline in Ontario, $16 billion expansion. So that's a big expansion. So if I know that people in Canada, like for example, Environmental Defense Canada is working to try to stop them. Also, there's this thing, a friend of mine gave me a list of the shareholders of Enbridge. And if we add, like, there were 3 different sections of RBC. RBC is the Royal Bank of Canada, and 3 sections of them, and they are the biggest shareholder of Enbridge if you add them up. Also, a few, I think it was last week, the statistics from Banking on Climate Chaos came out, the last version. And you can see that in 2022, the bank that has spent the most money on fossil fuel in the world is RBC, is the Royal Bank of Canada. It was more than JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Citi. And so it definitely is a bank that we should campaign to divest from, as well as from Enbridge. So that was my 5-minute on Line 9. So I think that we need to unite our forces so that we can shut down or shut at least the mouth of the snake. And thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you so much, Alain, for bringing.
I just wanted to say one thing. The pipeline no longer brings oil to Portland, Vermont.
Oh, okay.
It's in Portland they voted for Portland, Maine, I think, Portland in Maine. They voted so that to prevent that from coming, but they do send some oil to Montreal, though. That's it. Okay, that's it.
Well, thank you so much. And in keeping with this, we're going to ask Greg Mickelson if he will, Alain, if you can stop sharing your screen.
If I can see that. Yep.
There you go. All right. And Greg, are you here? Yes, there you are. I want to oh look, I had all your things. I had all your stuff. See if we can get through here. All right. So Greg Mickelson is going to talk about the letter that we have going for the Canadian ministers. Greg, go ahead and jump right on in there.
Sure. Well, Skabewis, described it pretty well. There's this 1977 treaty that the U.S. has with Canada that, is pre-existed and superseded by all the Indigenous treaty rights that people have been talking about. And of course, those aren't mentioned when the Canadian government tries to use this treaty to keep this dangerous pipeline going. The other thing that their action ignores is that there's a clause in the pipeline treaty itself that authorizes governments to protect the environment against pipelines. And then just to mention, maybe a few other things, please go to that website that's in the chat and sign the letter on your own behalf. And if you're authorized, we already have a lot of wonderful organizations, but we'd like to get as many as possible. So, if you're part of an organization, we'd like to get a lot of organizations on there as well. This is part of a, cross-border strategy that's informed by struggles around the world that are sadly also often against Canadian fossil fuel and mining companies, which are operating pretty much anywhere. And then finally, we encourage anybody who's interested to attend the next monthly meeting of the Cross-Border Organizing Working Group, or CBAUG, as I like to call it, which is a working group of that larger Line 5 coalition that Skabewis was talking about. And that's pretty much it.
Great. Thank you so much. Skabewis, do you want to just say one more thing about our events before we start?
I'm going to be happy to see as many people in here and many more on September 4th on the Mignault Bridge. Let's figure out how to color code our message on T-shirts and be there in mass and act like a tourist and come enjoy the environment and the water there. So I think that's all I can say, is to encourage people to focus on that and know that we've got battles up and down the line, and we've got people who are ready to put their lives on the line, and money on the line, their political lifeline on the line, and join with us. So I appreciate everyone that's contributed today to this session.
Yes, I agree. And here is our Line 5 coalition. The last Monday of the month, we always meet at 11 a.m. Central, and we've got some working groups. If you guys want to join up and be a part of this movement, we will absolutely welcome you. And communitiesunitedbywater.org is there with all the news and a way to reach out to us. And also, we are raising some money to send some of us to Ottawa when we figure out when this letter is going to be delivered. So at Communities United by Water too, there's a Native American Education Technologies. You can make a donation to them, and however else. So we've got some time if anybody wants to speak up or introduce or ask questions. Nobody's got hands. Well, wait.
There's a hand.
Where? I'm missing it, but
Linda put it up.
Yeah. Yes. Hi. I'm part of Extinction Rebellion in Boston, and I I had a question for Alain, really. I wanted to know more about that action up in Montreal with those folks that blockaded. And I just was wondering if there's a way to get more information about that or to connect with those folks. Thanks.
Yes, well, they have a Facebook page, so I can find it and put it in the chat, or also yeah, their name is in French though, Collectif Antigone. So it's
If you could put it in the chat, that would be fabulous.
yeah. So I need a minute to find it.
And was that particular action in part led by some Micmacs, or was there some Micmacs involved with another Enbridge terminal blockade or something in the last couple of months that you know of?
Not to my knowledge, no. This is lots of former people from Greenpeace, people who are formed to escalade. How do you say escalade in English? Climbing, sorry.
Yes, climbing.
A bunch of climbers. Yes, 6 of them. Yeah, 6 climbers.
Yeah.
We used to work for Greenpeace at some point.
Yeah.
Some of them.
Looks like a great action. Did you say they're still there?
No. They lasted 23 hours.
Oh,
You should
wow.
have seen the amount of police they sent. Like it.
Yes, I bet.
Some were dressed in army and the fire trucks and firemen, and I don't know, maybe there were like 40 trucks and police cars and stuff. It was really impressive. So yeah, they couldn't last more than 23 hours.
Right.
It's the second time they blocked this Valero terminal. The first time was in I think it was 2016. It was done by Greenpeace, and they didn't have this container, so they only lasted 3 hours.
Uh-huh.
And it was pretty cold in October in Montreal, maybe 3-4 degrees.
And for this recent action, are there legal cases still pending, or what's the status?
Oh yes.
Yeah,
We can
yeah.
wait. It's going to take maybe a year or two.
Yeah.
Alain, is there a bail or a legal fund going on?
There's one. Yes, I can also find that and send to you.
Yeah, drop that in the chat for sure.
Yeah.
Joe?
Hey all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Joe Meinholtz. I'm from Ho-Chunk land and closer to Fort Atkinson, but I spent some time on line 3 with 2. It's good to see some of you again. I wanted to ask about if this coalition is in contact or like understands what the situation is with the Biden administration, cutting through these different state fights to Biden administration releases this huge long promise about guaranteeing treaty resources. I don't know, was it 4 months ago? And anyway, with line 3, we saw, just like Ron Turney said on the video, environmental monitors hired by Enbridge. Also, the clever ways that they sort of talk to the right person about treaties, but not the other people about treaties, to say that they did something when the tribes, in Michigan are unanimous against it. So wondering what the status is with line 5 and conversation with Biden administration according to those promises that they made about treaty guarantees.
I think they're not doing what they said they were going to do. That's all I can see. But maybe someone else has more information.
I'm just wondering if any of the people that kind of work out of Washington, D.C., with some of the organizations would have anything to say about that. I don't know. Cheryl, are you able to comment on that at all?
I apologize. I missed the question.
The Biden administration, the status of Biden administration in regards to treaties and its relationship, for example, Army Corps of Engineer, Department of Interior, what are you seeing in terms of administration policy filtering down or up?
Lip service only. They don't seem to be any better than the previous administration, unfortunately. They just talk a good game. Dawn, do you want to add anything on that?
I was going to say, Dawn, do you want to?
Sure. I can add a little bit. Let me put my hand down too. Well, I mean, not a whole lot, but other than we did have a meeting on the 11th with the EPA, and then Army Corps was there to listen in, our wonderful Bill Sandy. So anyway, from that meeting, I did remind him about the Article 6, and we did discuss a little bit about their proposed stand for treaty rights. Yeah, we're hoping that it'll go farther. And I did mention that there needs to be policy change at that level. That's where we got to be and to make any changes. So we are planning a second meeting, and I think probably it's not going to be till sometime this summer. So touch base with us before then, and keep in contact. So that's what I have to bring on that message. Yep. And then I just had a question for Ronnie too. I'd like to make sure we uplift your work. So however we can do that, let us know.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you all for coming. We've recorded this, so we'll be making that available. And again, communitiesunitedbywater.org, sign up and reach out. And hopefully we can do this again and keep ourselves connected and up to date. Skabewis, anything you want to end with?
Miigwech for everyone for coming here. I know it's a evening time and a lot of people have a lot of things to do when they're off of work. So just appreciation sent out on behalf of all our organizations who have called for this and worked together. So Miigwech.
All right.